The morning rush at Garrison's had finally died down. Jasmine Taylor wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and took a deep breath. 6 hours into her shift, and her feet were already killing her. But she couldn't complain, not when these tips were helping pay for next semester's textbooks. "Order up for table 12, called out Chef Rodriguez from the kitchen. Jasmine quickly adjusted her black apron, checked her appearance in the reflection of a polished serving tray, and plastered on her signature smile. No matter how tired she felt, customers never saw anything but warmth from her. "Coming right up," she called back, balancing 3 plates of steaming food along her arm with the practiced ease of someone who'd been doing this job for years. As she delivered the meals to an elderly couple and their adult daughter, the woman at the table reached out and touched Jasmine's wrist gently. "You're the reason we keep coming back here, you know," she said. "Nobody else remembers that my husband likes extra lemons with his water or that I'm allergic to cilantro." Jasmine felt a genuine smile replace her professional one. "That's what I'm here for, Mrs. Chen. You'll enjoy your meal now." These were the moments that made the job worthwhile. The connections, the regulars who requested her section, the feeling that she was doing more than just serving food. Back at the wait station, Jasmine checked her phone quickly. 2 text messages from her mom, who was watching 6-year-old Zoe and 4-year-old Tyler while Jasmine worked her double shift. "Tyler's fever is down. Don't worry. Focus on work. We're fine." Jasmine exhaled with relief. Last night had been rough, with Tyler's temperature hitting 102. She'd nearly called out of work, but couldn't afford to lose the day's wages, not with rent due next week and her tuition payment the week after that. "Checking your phone again, Taylor." Richard Brooks, the floor manager, appeared behind her with his ever-present tablet. "That's the 3rd time today. You know the policy." Jasmine quickly tucked her phone away. "Sorry, Richard. My son was sick last night. I was just—" "Save it," he cut her off, eyes already back on his screen. "Table 14 needs water refills and 16 just got seated in your section. And for God's sake, fix your hair before you go out there. This isn't a diner." Jasmine bit her tongue and nodded, reaching up to tuck a few stray curls back into her tight bun. Richard had been riding her especially hard lately, writing her up for the smallest infractions. She'd seen him do the same to other black staff members, while somehow missing similar issues with white servers. But Jasmine couldn't afford to make waves. Not when this job was keeping her family afloat and her dreams of a business degree within reach. 3 more semesters, she reminded herself. 3 more semesters and she'd have her diploma, and places like Garrison's could be in her rearview mirror. Later, during her break, Jasmine sat alone in the staff room, a textbook open on her lap as she quickly ate a sandwich. She'd gotten permission to use her breaks for studying, though it meant isolating herself from the workplace gossip and camaraderie. "Human Resource Management in Practice," read the chapter title. Jasmine couldn't help but smile at the irony. If only Richard would read this book. Her phone buzzed with a reminder. Tyler's doctor. Friday, 2 p.m. She'd need to switch shifts again. Her heart sank knowing she'd have to ask Richard, who made no secret of his irritation with her constant scheduling issues. 15 minutes, Jasmine called Lisa, another server, poking her head into the break room. And heads up, Richard's on the warpath. "Corporate guys coming in for a surprise visit this week." "Thanks for the warning," Jasmine replied, closing her textbook with a sigh. As she headed back to the floor, Jasmine squared her shoulders and lifted her chin. Tonight's tips would go toward Tyler's medicine. Tomorrow's would help with the electric bill. Next week's might, just might, let her buy Zoe those new shoes she needed for school. Every table, every smile, every perfectly delivered meal was another step towards something better. And if that meant dealing with Richard's microaggressions and impossible standards for a while longer, so be it. Jasmine Taylor hadn't come this far to give up now. What she didn't know was that everything was about to change, starting with the shabby-looking man who would walk through Garrison's doors tomorrow afternoon. A man who would test her kindness, cost her job, and ultimately transform her life in ways she could never imagine. Tuesday afternoons at Garrison's were typically slow, a brief lull between the lunch and dinner crowds. Jasmine was grateful for the lighter workload today, especially after getting only 4 hours of sleep. Tyler's fever had broken, but he'd been cranky and clingy all night, wanting only his mama's comfort. She leaned against the hostess stand, chatting with Daphne, who'd been working at Garrison's for nearly 15 years and knew all the restaurant's secrets. "All I'm saying is that corporate's been sending spies into different locations," Daphne whispered, glancing around to make sure Richard wasn't within earshot. Lisa's cousin works at the downtown location, and she swears some big executive came in dressed like a regular person, testing the staff. Jasmine rolled her eyes. That's just restaurant urban legend. Besides, even if it's true, what are the chances they'd come here? The front door chimed, interrupting their conversation. Both women turned to see who had entered. A man stood awkwardly in the entrance. He was in his 60s, maybe older, with gray hair that needed a trim and clothes that had seen better days. His plaid button-up shirt was clean but worn at the elbows, and his khaki pants had a small tear near one knee. His shoes were scuffed and dusty. Daphne supplely wrinkled her nose. "Your section or mine?" Before Jasmine could answer, she noticed Richard emerging from his office, eyes narrowing at the newcomer. She'd seen that look before, the one that said he was about to maintain the restaurant's standards by turning someone away. "I've got him," Jasmine said quickly, grabbing a menu and moving forward before Richard could intervene. "Welcome to Garrison's," she greeted warmly. "Table for one today?" The man seemed surprised by her friendly tone. "Yes, just me." His voice was soft, with a slight southern drawl that reminded Jasmine of her grandfather. She led him to a small table by the window, noticing how he studied everything around him with curious eyes. Not a regular restaurant-goer, she guessed. Maybe a tourist or someone treating himself to a special meal. "Can I start you with something to drink? Coffee? Water?" Jasmine offered, placing the menu in front of him. "Just water, please." "Thank you for your kindness, miss." He smiled, revealing a gap between his front teeth. As Jasmine walked away, she felt Richard stare burning into her back. Sure enough, he intercepted her at the drink station. "What are you doing?" he hissed under his breath. "Look at him. He probably can't afford the appetizers, let alone a full meal." Jasmine measured her words carefully. "We're not exactly turning people away right now, Richard. The dining room's practically empty." "That's not the point. Garrison's has an image to maintain. We're not a charity kitchen." "He's a customer until proven otherwise," Jasmine replied, filling a water glass. "And company policy says we don't discriminate based on appearance." Richard's jaw tightened. "Fine. But if this causes any problems, it's on you." Jasmine returned to the table with water and a basket of bread. The man, who introduced himself simply as Mikkel, seemed overwhelmed by the menu. "Everything's so fancy," he commented, his weathered fingers tracing the embossed logo. "What would you recommend for someone who's, well, watching his budget?" Instead of the dismissive response many servers might give, Jasmine pulled out her order pad and sat down across from him. "Let me help you navigate. Our lunch specials are the best value, especially the pasta dishes. They come with salad and bread for just $20. Michael's face fell slightly. "I should probably admit something. Anna seemed to have left my wallet at home. I didn't realize until I was already here." He looked genuinely embarrassed. "I should go." Jasmine hesitated, then made a quick calculation in her head. Yesterday's tips had been good. Tyler's medicine hadn't cost as much as she'd feared. "What were you in the mood for, Michael?" she asked, ignoring his comment about leaving. "Pardon?" His eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Food-wise, were you thinking something hearty? Light? Comfort food?" Michael studied her face, seeming confused by her reaction. "I'd always enjoyed a good bowl of soup on days like this, but really, I shoaled. Our chef makes an amazing French onion soup. Let me bring you a bowl. Don't worry about it." Jasmine stood up, decision made. As she walked back toward the kitchen, she caught a glimpse of Richard watching her from across the restaurant, tablet in hand, eyes narrowed with suspicion. Whatever. She'd deal with him later. What Jasmine didn't notice was the way Michael's eyes followed her, not with the embarrassment of someone accepting charity, but with the careful assessment of someone gathering important information. The kitchen was bustling with preparation for the dinner service when Jasmine pushed through the swinging doors. Chef Rodriguez looked up from the sauce he was stirring. "Order in," he asked, wiping his hands on his apron. "French onion soup," Jasmine replied, punching it into the system. She hesitated, then added, "And can you make it special? It's for someone who could use a little extra today." The chef glanced at her knowingly. This wasn't the first time Jasmine had made such a request. He gave a slight nod and turned to his sous chef. "Jane, French onion, full garnish, and throw in a side of the garlic bread." Jasmine smiled gratefully. The kitchen staff respected her because she always treated them with dignity. Unlike some servers who barked orders and blamed the kitchen for every complaint. While waiting for the order, Jasmine did a quick round of her other tables. As she refilled water glasses and cleared empty plates, she kept glancing at Michael, who sat quietly observing the restaurant. There was something thoughtful about the way he watched everything, not impatient or entitled like many customers, but genuinely interested. When she returned to the kitchen, the soup was ready, a steaming bowl of rich broth with melted cheese bubbling over the sides, accompanied by a small basket of garlic bread. It looked and smelled divine. "Order up, Jasmine," called Chef Rodriguez. Then, more quietly as she approached, I added extra cheese and the good wine in the broth. No charge. Jasmine felt a rush of appreciation for her co-workers. Even in a place with strict rules like Garrison's, there was still a hidden network of human kindness. She carried the tray to Michael's table, setting it down with a flourish. "French onion soup with our house-made garlic bread," she announced proudly. Michael's eyes widened at the presentation. "This looks amazing, but I really shouldn't." "It's already made," Jasmine interrupted gently. "Can't send it back now." Michael looked up at her, a mixture of gratitude and concern in his eyes. "Young lady, I don't want you getting into trouble on my account. I've worked in places like this before. I know there are rules." Jasmine shrugged, keeping her voice low. "Some rules matter more than others. Enjoy your soup while it's hot." As Michael took his first spoonful, his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "This is outstanding," he said after swallowing. "Reminds me of a little place in New Orleans where I used to be years ago." For the next 20 minutes, Jasmine checked on Michael between serving her other tables. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, and shared little stories about restaurants he'd visited across the country. There was something captivating about his tales. They held the weight of experience rather than just idle chatter. When he finished, she cleared his empty bowl. "How was everything?" "Perfect," Michael replied. "Best meal I've had in weeks." His expression grew serious. "But we still have the matter of the bill." Jasmine glanced around to make sure Richard wasn't nearby. "Don't worry about it," she said quietly. "It's taken care of." Michael's eyebrows rose. "By the restaurant?" Jasmine gave a small laugh. "No, by me." She pulled out her order pad and wrote something down. Sliding the paper across to him, she said, "Here's your check, all paid up." The piece of paper simply read, "Pay it forward someday." Gee. Michael stared at the note for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes had a different quality to them, sharper, more focused. "You paid for my meal?" "Out of your own pocket?" he asked carefully. Jasmine nodded. "It's not a big deal. The soup doesn't cost much." "But why would you do that for a complete stranger?" She thought about it for a moment. "Because everyone deserves kindness, especially when they're having a rough day. And because someone did the same for me once, when I really needed it." Michael folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. "I won't forget this, Jasmine. And I promise I'll return the favor someday." She smiled, assuming it was just a nice thing to say. "No need. Just enjoy the rest of your day." As Michael stood to leave, Jasmine noticed Richard watching from across the room, his face hard as stone. He was tapping furiously on his tablet, his eyes never leaving her. A cold feeling settled in her stomach. She'd been careful, but somehow Richard knew what she'd done. And from the look on his face, she was in serious trouble. What she didn't realize as Michael walked out the door was that her simple act of kindness had just set life-changing events in motion for both of them. Jasmine's alarm went off at 5:30 the next morning. She groaned, hitting the snooze button once before forcing herself to sit up. The kids wouldn't need to be up for school for another hour, giving her precious time to shower and prepare for the day ahead. As she moved quietly around the small apartment, setting out cereal bowls and children's clothes, her mind kept replaying yesterday's events. Richard's hard stare. The older man, Michael, and his grateful smile. The tiny note she'd written instead of a bill. Had it been worth the risk? She'd probably get written up, maybe lose a shift or two as punishment, But when she remembered Michael's surprise at her kindness, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. By 7:15, she was dropping the kids at her mother's place. Her shift didn't start until 10, but she had planned to use the morning hours to study at the library. Her human resources exam was just 2 weeks away. "You look worried, baby," her mother said, handing her a travel mug of coffee. "Everything okay at work?" Jasmine sighed. "Just the usual Richard drama. Nothing I can't handle." "That man needs to find Jesus," her mother muttered, shaking her head. "Or a hobby, something besides making your life difficult." "I'll call you on my break," Jasmine promised, kissing her mom on the cheek and giving the kids one last hug before heading out. She arrived at Garrison's 15 minutes early, as usual. The parking lot was oddly full for a Wednesday morning. As she walked toward the entrance, she spotted an unfamiliar luxury car with corporate parking credentials. "Great," she murmured. "Just what we need today." Inside, the atmosphere felt tense. Lisa was working the breakfast shift and caught Jasmine's eye immediately, giving her a worried look. "What's going on?" Jasmine whispered as they passed each other near the coat check. "Regional managers here," Lisa whispered back. "With Richard. In the office. They've been asking about you." Jasmine's stomach dropped. Before she could ask more, the hostess approached her. "Jasmine, Richard wants to see you in the office right away. He said to come before you clock in." Taking a deep breath, Jasmine straightened her uniform and walked toward the back office. She'd stand her ground, explain that the soup barely cost anything. Sure, she'd broken a rule, but serving a hungry person seemed more important than a few dollars of profit. When she opened the office door, 3 people were waiting inside. Richard stood behind the desk, his face revealing a poorly concealed satisfaction. Beside him was Patricia Winters, the regional supervisor, a woman known for her strict adherence to company policies. The third person was a security guard Jasmine didn't recognize. "Jasmine, come in and close the door," Patricia said, her voice clipped and professional. "What's this about?" Jasmine asked, though she already knew. Richard turned his tablet around, showing security footage from yesterday. The silent video clearly showed Jasmine serving Michael, then returning later with a slip of paper instead of a bill. "Can to explain this?" Patricia asked. Jasmine took a steady breath. A customer came in who had forgotten his wallet. He was elderly and seemed like he might be going through a rough time. I made a judgment call to help him out. "By stealing from the company," Richard interjected. "I didn't steal anything," Jasmine replied firmly. "I paid for his meal myself. Check the register. The soup was paid for in cash. My cash." Patricia's expression didn't change. Company policy strictly prohibits employees covering customer bills. It creates liability issues and sets dangerous precedents. "It was just soup," Jasmine said, hearing the desperation creeping into her voice. The man was hungry. "If every server decided which policies to follow based on their feelings, we'd have chaos," Patricia replied. "The rules exist for a reason." Richard slid a document across the desk. "We're terminating your employment, effective immediately. This form acknowledges receipt of your final paycheck, which includes today's scheduled hours despite you not working them." The words hit Jasmine like a physical blow. Termination? Not a write-up or suspension, but fired? "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm a single mom. I have 2 kids. I've worked here for 3 years with barely a day off. My customer satisfaction scores are the highest in the restaurant." She felt tears threatening but forced them back. All this over a bowl of soup. All this over deliberately violating company policy, Patricia corrected. "Your personal situation, while unfortunate, doesn't exempt you from following the rules that every other employee manages to follow." Richard looked almost gleeful as he added, "The security officer will escort you to collect your personal items." Jasmine stood frozen, her mind racing through calculations. Rent due in 10 days. Tyler's medicine. The upcoming tuition payment. Her perfect attendance record at school shot because she'd need to find another job immediately. All because she'd shown kindness to a stranger. As the security guard led her to the break room to gather her things, she passed Lisa and Daphne, both watching with shocked expressions. Chef Rodriguez emerged from the kitchen, concern written across his face. "What's happening?" he asked. "I've been fired," Jasmine said, the words feeling unreal as she spoke them. For helping that customer yesterday. The chef's face darkened with anger. This is wrong. I'll speak to Richard. Don't, Jasmine interrupted. You need this job too. It's not worth it. 20 minutes later, she sat in her car in the parking lot, still in uniform, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother asking about dinner plans, a normal question from a normal day that now seemed from another lifetime. What Jasmine didn't see was the sleek Blacktown car pulling into the parking space behind her, or the well-dressed man who stepped out of it, watching her with concern before turning toward Garrison's entrance with purpose in his stride. Back inside Garrison's, the morning rush was in full swing. The hostess was seating a party of 4 when the front door opened again. She looked up, ready with her customer service smile, only to freeze in place. "Good morning," said the man who entered, dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit. His silver hair was neatly trimmed, and his polished leather shoes gleamed under the restaurant lights. The hostess blinked, then fumbled for words. "Mr. Garrison, we weren't expecting, no one told us you were coming today." Michael Garrison smiled, the same gap-toothed smile that had thanked Jasmine for soup the day before. "That was rather the point, Daphne," he said, reading her name tag. "I prefer to see how my restaurants operate when they don't know the boss is watching." Daphne's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "You were here yesterday, as a customer." "Indeed I was, and I had quite the interesting experience." His voice remained pleasant, but there was a steely undertone that made Daphne straighten her posture. "I need to speak with your manager immediately, and the regional supervisor if she's still here." "Of course, sir, right away." As Daphne scurried off to the back office, Michael took a moment to observe the restaurant. It was his 15th location in a chain that had grown from a single-family diner 30 years ago. The food was good, the decor tasteful, the prices fair, all things he insisted on. But something had been missing lately from the Garrison's experience: heart. That's why he'd started his undercover visits 6 months ago. Not announced inspections where everyone put on their best behavior, but real experiences as a customer. What he'd seen had troubled him deeply: efficiency over empathy, rules over reason, profits over people. Until yesterday, when a young waitress had shown him exactly what Garrison's should stand for. The office door opened, and Richard emerged with Patricia beside him. The color drained from Richard's face as he recognized Michael despite the change in appearance. "Mr. Garrison," Patricia recovered first, extending her hand. "What an unexpected honor. If we'd known you were coming." "You'd have prepared a show for me," Michael finished, not unkindly. "That's precisely why I didn't call ahead." He glanced around the restaurant. "Is there somewhere private we can talk?" Minutes later, in the back office, Michael sat behind the desk, a symbolic choice that wasn't lost on either Richard or Patricia, who perched uncomfortably in guest chairs. "I understand you terminated an employee this morning," Michael began without preamble. Richard shifted in his seat. "Yes, sir. A server named Jasmine Taylor. She violated company policy by showing kindness to a customer who appeared to be in need," Michael interrupted. "That customer was me." The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing horror beneath. Richard looked like he might be ill. "Sir," Patricia ventured finally, "we had no idea." "Clearly," Michael agreed. "But that's not the issue here. The issue is that you fired someone for an act of compassion." He leaned forward. "Did either of you bother to ask why she did it, or check her employment record before making your decision?" Neither responded. Michael opened a folder on the desk, Jasmine's personnel file, which he'd requested upon arrival. 3 years of exemplary service, highest customer satisfaction ratings in the restaurant, perfect attendance despite being a single mother putting herself through college. He looked up at them. "And you fired her because she paid $9 for soup for an old man who forgot his wallet." "Sir, policy clearly states," Richard began. "I wrote that policy," Michael cut him off sharply. "I wrote it to prevent employees from running scams with friends posing as customers, not to punish acts of humanity." He stood up, pacing the small office. "When I started this company, our first location was just a tiny place, 10 tables. We had regulars who sometimes came up short. You know what my mother, the original chef, used to say? Feed them anyway. Tomorrow they might have enough to pay double. He shook his head. Somewhere along the way, we lost that philosophy. Michael pulled out his phone, tapping a quick message before continuing. I've been visiting all our locations undercover for the past 6 months, testing not just food quality or service efficiency, but the heart of our operations. Most locations failed this test spectacularly. He looked pointedly at Richard. None quite as badly as this one. Richard swallowed hard. Sir, I was just following protocol over people, Michael finished. Yes, I've noticed your management style, Mr. Brooks. Watching you from the corner yesterday was quite educational. The way you treat your staff, particularly women of color, is troubling to say the least. Patricia looked stricken. Mr. Garrison, if I had known about these issues. But you should have known, Michael replied gently. That's what regional supervision means, Ms. Winters. Not just checking the numbers, but understanding the culture. A knock at the door interrupted them. Michael called for the person to enter. It was Lisa, looking nervous. You wanted to see me, Mr. Garrison. Yes. Could you tell me where Jasmine might have gone? I saw her in the parking lot earlier, but she's no longer there. Lisa hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty to her co-worker and answering the big boss. She mentioned heading to the library to study. She has an exam coming up. Michael nodded. Thank you, that's all for now. After Lisa left, Michael turned back to Richard and Patricia. I'm making some changes, effective immediately. Jasmine sat at a small table in the back corner of the public library, textbooks spread around her, but she couldn't focus. Her eyes kept reading the same paragraph over and over without absorbing a word. How could everything fall apart so quickly? Her phone buzzed. Another message from Chef Rodriguez. We're all upset about what happened. This isn't right. She appreciated the support but turned her phone face down. She needed to figure out her next steps, not dwell on what she'd lost. The community college job board might have some listings. Maybe that cafe near campus was still hiring. Excuse me, is this seat taken? Jasmine looked up, ready to say the empty chair was available, then froze. Standing beside her table was the older man from yesterday, except he looked completely different. Gone were the worn clothes and disheveled appearance. Instead, he wore an expensive suit and carried himself with unmistakable authority. Michael? She asked, confusion evident in her voice. May I? He gestured to the chair again. When she nodded mutely, he sat down, placing a leather portfolio on the table between them. I owe you an explanation, he began, his voice the same gentle tone she remembered from yesterday, despite his transformed appearance. My name is Michael Garrison. I own Garrison's Restaurant Group. Jasmine's mouth fell open. You're the owner. But yesterday you were testing my restaurants, he finished for her. I visit locations undercover to see how they really operate when no one's putting on a show for the boss. He smiled ruefully. Let's just say the results have been eye-opening. Jasmine struggled to process this information. So the soup, the whole thing, it was a test. Not exactly. I genuinely forgot my wallet. But what started as an embarrassing senior moment became an opportunity to see the true character of your restaurant staff. He leaned forward. Most would have called a manager. Some might have asked me to leave. You showed compassion at personal risk. And got fired for it, Jasmine said quietly. Michael's expression hardened. Yes, a decision I've just overturned. Hope flooded in Jasmine's chest, but she tamped it down. You want me to come back to work? Under Richard? Richard no longer works for Garrison's, Michael stated flatly. His management style was inconsistent with our values, and after reviewing security footage from the past month, I found multiple instances of concerning behavior. Jasmine wasn't sure how to respond. As much as Richard had made her work life difficult, she hadn't wished for him to lose his job. Reading her expression, Michael added, he'll receive a fair severance package. But Garrison's needs leadership that understands the balance between following rules and recognizing when compassion should prevail. He opened the portfolio and slid a document across to her. Which brings me to why I'm here. This isn't just an offer to return to your serving position, it's a management proposal. Jasmine skimmed the paper, her eyes widening at the title, assistant manager, with a salary that was nearly triple what she made in tips. I don't understand, she whispered. I'm still in school. I don't have management experience. You have something more valuable, judgment and heart. The technical aspects can be learned. Michael tapped the document. This position comes with flexible hours to accommodate your education. In fact, I'm particularly interested in your business degree. You checked my background, Jasmine realized. Of course. I also spoke with your coworkers this morning. They hold you in remarkably high regard. He leaned back in his chair. Garrison's began as a family business built on the principle that good food and genuine care create loyal customers. Somewhere along the way, we've lost sight of that second part. Jasmine glanced down at the offer again, still stunned. Additionally, Michael continued, I've established a company-wide education program that will cover the remainder of your tuition. We're calling it the Compassion Initiative, a program designed to reward employees who demonstrate exceptional humanity in their customer interactions. All this because of soup? Jasmine asked, bewildered by how quickly her fortunes had reversed. Michael chuckled. The soup was just the visible act. What matters is the instinct behind it, the recognition that sometimes people need help, not judgment. He grew serious. That's the culture I want to rebuild across all our locations, starting here. Jasmine touched the document, tracing her fingers over the salary number again. Tyler could have the medicine he needed. Zoe could join the dance class she'd been begging for. Their apartment's leaky ceiling might finally get fixed. What about Patricia Winters? She asked, suddenly remembering the regional supervisor who had signed her termination papers. Ms. Winters has been reassigned to a training position. Her first project will be developing guidelines for the Compassion Initiative. I believe in second chances, another value I hope you'll help restore to our company culture. Michael held out his hand. So, what do you say? Ready to help me transform Garrison's back into the kind of place where kindness matters as much as the bottom line? For the first time since walking out of the restaurant that morning, Jasmine smiled. She reached out and shook his hand firmly. When do I start? 6 months passed in the blink of an eye. Jasmine stood in front of the mirror in her new apartment, adjusting the collar of her blazer. The morning sunlight streamed through windows twice the size of those in her old place. From the kitchen came the sounds of her children eating breakfast, their voices mingling with her mother's gentle reminders to hurry up. Mom, don't forget you promised to come to my science fair today, Zoe called out. 3 o'clock sharp, Jasmine replied, walking into the kitchen and dropping a kiss on her daughter's head. I've already blocked it off in my calendar. That was one of the best parts of her new position, the flexibility to be present for moments that mattered. No more missing school events because she couldn't swap shifts. No more choosing between work and family. Her phone pinged with a message from Lisa, now the head server at Garrison's. The regional trainers are here. Nervous but excited. Jasmine texted back a quick encouragement before grabbing her laptop bag. Today was a big day for everyone. You look important, her mother said with pride, handing her a travel mug of coffee. I look like someone who's going to be late if she doesn't get moving, Jasmine laughed, though inside she still felt a flutter of disbelief at how much had changed. In just 6 months, she had finished her business degree, the final semester covered by the company's new education program. She had moved her family into a safer neighborhood with better schools. And most importantly, she had helped transform Garrison's into a workplace where employees were valued for their humanity, not just their productivity. The drive to the restaurant took 15 minutes. As she pulled into the parking lot, Jasmine noted the new sign above the entrance. Garrison's, good food, good hearts, the updated slogan that had been her suggestion during a marketing meeting. Inside, the dining room had been rearranged for today's training session. Servers and managers from 6 different locations sat at tables, reviewing materials and chatting. At the front of the room stood Chef Rodriguez, now the kitchen director for the entire southern region, setting up a presentation. There she is, he called when he spotted Jasmine. The woman herself. Faces turned her way, some familiar, most new. Jasmine felt a moment of self-consciousness before reminding herself that she belonged here. This was her program, after all. Sorry I'm a couple minutes late, she said, setting up her laptop. School drop-off was hectic. No worries, said a familiar voice behind her. Michael Garrison entered from the back office, casual in a button-down shirt rather than his usual suit. Family comes first. That's part of what we're teaching today, isn't it? The training session began with Michael sharing the story that had started it all, his experience as a forgotten wallet customer and the waitress who had shown him kindness. He never mentioned that he had deliberately been testing the staff, allowing everyone to believe it had been a happy accident that revealed a problem in company culture. Then it was Jasmine's turn. Standing before the group, diploma fresh on her wall and 6 months of management experience under her belt, she introduced the Compassion Initiative that had now been implemented across half the company's locations. The Jasmine rule is simple, she explained, still blushing slightly when people used the nickname for her program. We trust our employees to make judgment calls when customers need help. No one gets punished for showing kindness. She clicked to the next slide, showing the results. Customer satisfaction up 22% across participating locations. Employee retention improved by 31%. Even profits had increased as word spread about the restaurant chain where genuine human connection mattered. But the numbers only tell part of the story, Jasmine continued. The real success is in the moments that don't make it into our reports. She shared anecdotes gathered over the past months. The family whose credit card was declined during a birthday celebration, saved from embarrassment by a quick-thinking server. The homeless team given a meal and connected with local resources. The elderly regular whose server noticed signs of illness and called family members, potentially saving his life. This isn't just about giving away free soup, Jasmine said, meeting the eyes of the trainees. It's about seeing people as people first, customers second. After the session, as the group broke for lunch, Michael pulled Jasmine aside. I've got something to show you, he said, leading her to the office. On the desk sat a thick folder. The board approved it this morning. We're establishing a foundation. Jasmine opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. The Garrison Family Foundation for Service Industry Support. Michael nodded. A non-profit that provides emergency assistance to food service workers facing financial hardship. Medical bills, housing crisis, disaster relief, the kind of situations that can derail a life. He tapped the papers. And we want you to run it. Jasmine looked up in shock. Me? But I've only been in management for 6 months. And you've already transformed half our company, Michael pointed out. Besides, who better to lead a foundation based on compassion than the person who inspired it? As the reality sank in, Jasmine thought about the stranger she'd served soup to on what had seemed like the worst day of her life. How that small moment of kindness had rippled outward, changing not just her own circumstances, but potentially thousands of others. Do you know what I've learned from all this? She asked quietly. What's that? Michael replied. Sometimes the smallest choices reveal who we truly are. And sometimes those small choices can change everything.